Human challenge study. This is where you actually test a disease in live people. You have to use a disease for the test for experiments, for instance, with viruses that are not able to hurt them. Head colds are particularly useful for that. You bring people in, isolate them to where they cannot have a specific virus, specifically head colds. There's a couple of varieties that are less common in some groups of people, so you can do that test. You don't immunize them or anything, you just let them get exposed to it by having one person at random in a controlled situation get sprayed in the sinuses, everybody gets sprayed, with virus-containing whatever. You pay them handsomely because it's really irritating. And they all spend a couple of weeks locked in a building to see if it can spread from person to person through the air conditioning. And another experiment by touching the same equipment but not actually being in the same room, or being in the same room but not touching, until everybody sneezes at least once by inducing a sneeze so that they don't know who is infected. Pretty much figure it out after a couple of days. You figure out how long it takes for the virus to show up in the average person before you do the sneeze experiment, so that you can test whether or not asymptomatic people can sneeze. This is an extremely simple thing to test, but you have to get people who are pretty much average people, and you have to get people who are willing to get a head cold for a couple $100 or whatever. Or they're dedicated people, or they're kind of trapped because they're medical students and you can have them participate in it if they want to get extra credit, which anybody who's ever been to college and dealt with something hardcore like that, yeah, they'll volunteer for the experiment. We just put them in a dorm room that's been sterilized, dorm rooms. Say, yeah, you're all part of Phi Beta Decapitated, or some other silly little name like that. Lots of people post on my channel when they don't know that I went to a college where I got away with sneaking into classes. Where is it? I'll find it in a minute. I don't know anything about testing to see if viruses transmit at all, much less how. I got to be the one in the room that was doing the sneezing towards mirrors. And also walking through a hallway and being encouraged to sneeze at different positions in it 3 times to see if a virus is transferred. Simple question. This is an anti-vaxxer, therefore also anti-germ theory denier. Or a germ theory denier, we can imply obviously as an anti-vaxxer. The idea with vaccines is pretty simple. If you get sick from something and become immune to it, but anti-vaxxers have to claim that they can't understand how that happens, even though you can test blood for antibodies and actually prove that it actually works a certain way. You have to literally act like we've never done an experiment. Guess what this person's doing? So anyway, the idea with anti-vaxxers is, in order for you to be anti-vax, you have to have the idea that you cannot induce an immunity. Now, this can be anywhere from saying it can only happen naturally to saying there's no such thing as viruses. Nobody can be infected by viruses unless you inject them. So I'm the channel this person showed up on. Where are the clinical studies and live trials that prove viruses can be transmitted person to person? What are the odds of you finding somebody who is so desperate to get extra credit in college that he did a test for, and by the way, a biology test at a college? It's a simple experiment. It actually didn't take that long. I mean, I got to be the participant that went through and just sneezed, on the mirror. And the other one was going through an area to see if you got infected at all with a very specific variety of virus. And then that was sent somewhere to be tested and isolated. And I got a head cold, and it wasn't cold and flu season. That was the whole test. Can you get colds or flus in not flu season or cold season? We're all exposed to some spray in the air, or healthy people who were just induced to sneeze so we could smell a sneeze in the air, which is nasty. But if you are psychosomatic, that could be a major deal. Maybe you're just allergic to other people's snert. Not a single doctor, virologist, or in fact any medical scientific professional on this planet can provide any proof whatsoever that you'll admit happened. They just take it as fact without evidence. They do not seem to exist. I wonder why we don't have these studies. They're called human challenge studies a lot of the time, but the actual name for them is, they don't have a generalized name. The experiment is going to be called person-to-person or airborne transmission of virus, a practical study or something like that. And the answer is yes, viruses transmit exactly the way everybody knows that they do. I'm one of many people that participated. Every college student that wants to make some extra credit or actually be taken seriously can just do this experiment. You're looking at college papers, and you're also looking at actual real studies. Now, what you'll do immediately say, well, that was a college paper, I'm not going to accept it. Or if it was a real study, you'll scream big pharma. You didn't come here to get proven wrong, especially by a volunteer that got sick. Well, you could have got it from anywhere. It was the time of year when it wasn't cold and flu season. It was the summer break. I came in voluntarily, got exposed to a hallway that had a person sneeze in it, and they didn't know whether they were infected at the time. It was before the signs of infection would show up. And I got a head cold. And I came back and told them how long it took after the fact. I wasn't allowed to come back until it was done, if it happened. And I had to have exact dates and times. And I requested summer credit or something like that, and they gave me $50 for the effort. And because there's technically a risk, especially with me having chronic medical problems. But I got a minor head cold during summer break. There was a summer break for college, actually. I took summer break. Most people didn't take summer breaks. That was the other thing. They asked for people who were taking summer breaks. And barring any other confounding thing, and I posted, I'm going to stay at home. I'm not really going to go out. I bicycled. Basically, I self-isolated before it was cool. And they told me if I did that, that would improve the quality of it. But if I came across anybody who sneezed, I had to note the time and date when it happened, and was it outside, inside, that sort of thing. And honestly, I didn't get around anybody who sneezed. I was very paranoid about it because it wasn't going to reduce the money. It was just that I didn't want to get a head cold already that I already had. Anyway, just a few days later, I got a head cold. Okay, we're going to do a snot test. And then I had to come back when it was done and do another snot test. And they confirmed it was a specific variety of head cold that they made sure that they did the experiment with the other person getting. And it matched. It wasn't particularly unusual. It's just one that you wouldn't get during summer. See how simple that shit is? And also it's hay fever season, so people thought they had head colds when they didn't, and standard things. But it wasn't a community-acquired virus in the area. I wasn't able to get exposed because nobody was around me most of the time. No one can provide proof to you anywhere on the entire planet. Well, that's a bold statement. Sounds like you came prepared to poo-poo anything, especially this big old turd in a punch bowl right here. Day 1, 80% of oral swabs were positive for viral, I misspelled viral RNA in patients that had this disease. This is a different study. It's a study on live people, volunteers. Day 5, only 50% of the oral swabs were positive. But 75% of anal swabs were positive for the virus coming out of them. They were already sloughing it, and their digestive system was acting as a way to get it out of their system. It had infected the digestive system. That sounds pretty sick. It's an RNA virus. Which one was it? Well, it was part of a human challenge study that you might have heard of. It's called this pandemic. Every time there's a disease, and they have to isolate people that are sick, they ask for volunteers who are confirmed to have an RNA virus or whatever in them and have them isolate. And then they also check everybody, once they have a test, to see if anybody who is a nurse practitioner or doctor has it. And you're in the middle of a, what did you call it? Clinical study, live trial. Live trial means you want a study you think can't exist where people were deliberately infected with viruses. It doesn't have to be deliberate, it just has to happen. We're in the middle of a test, experiment. It's happening. You're going to come back and say pandemic and all this other shit, and I'm going to delete your comment when you don't come back. They study every single virus to see what the transmission is. People who have not come near anyone don't get the virus. People who have not come near anyone who came from the area where the virus came from. Don't have it in the system. This has been found out with other viruses. Head cold experiments are the model, especially for coronaviruses, because a lot of head colds are caused by coronaviruses, for doing these tests. And some coronaviruses won't transmit except in certain conditions, like in certain environments, like inside of a building or whatever. And very few people want to submit to this sort of thing. But if you're in very good condition and have a lot of hubris and you're an idiot in college, you can get the experiment done. And a lot of people in college will do these experiments for their term paper or to get their PhD. And they are well-controlled studies. And your statement here is, their learning takes it as given without any evidence. When you're complaining about any evidence that's presented, that's what you're going to do. It's like someone saying, I dare you to prove that any building besides Building 7 fell in free fall just from fire, which is what caused it. Okay, here's 10 of them. Well, they're all rigged. I'm not going to believe you. In fact, there was a French term for destroying a building with fire by using a controlled burn process to cave a building inside, to implode a building. And then someone says, well, that's proof that the fire was started to implode the building because they keep weaseling out. You're a reality denier and you're going to simply lie. That's it. I'm not sugarcoating it. But yeah, every time a disease comes out, they test the transmission rate and transmission effect. And you want live clinical studies. But you don't assume people would volunteer for this. Because you can do it with viruses that are less dangerous. So you're going to demand that, well, I want a test done with Ebola, because you know somebody won't volunteer to possibly get killed. You create an impossible demand, an impossible one to achieve. And if somebody does it, yes, people have done experiments with syphilis, by the way, the transmission rate stuff for it. Then you call them monsters and say they're part of the same thing that causes Big Pharma to be evil. They're willing to kill people. You're demanding a study where a person could die, and then when they do the study to prove you wrong, you just claim that it's all part of some sort of Hitler-like thing. Thanks for confirming my my suspicions that the Chinese 50-cent army has to show up on everybody's channel now. I think you're being overpaid. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with